Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, Daesh militants have entered the Palestinian refugee camp Yarmouk in Damascus, according to officials. This, as the Iraqi government has declared a magnificent victory over Daesh militants in the city of Tikrit. Also on tonight's program, in Yemen, a blast at a dairy factory kills 35. Nigeria's new ruler says it's going to spare no effort in squashing the Daesh group Boko Haram. In British politics tonight, D-minus 36 days and counting. This, as Labour tonight draws the battle lines as it attacks 0 hours contracts. And we prepare for the ITV leaders debate here on SHR. U.S. political news, text messages confirm Allen West tried to suppress the story that Charles C. Jones wrote on Got News. We have that story. And U.S. Senator Bob Menendez indicted on corruption charges. We have all those stories and more on the Evan Miller Report tonight, plus Corey Evans.
Thank you, Jay. The oldest living person in the world, torch, has been passed, but not without setting a Guinness World Record. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker has made a big announcement today, but not what Jay was expecting. GoDaddy's IPO is the highlight of my biz report today? Well, GoDaddy, I guess. Turns out transvestites aren't automatically entitled to use their, quote, ideal facilities in lawsuits across America. And the Late Late Show does April Fool's Day correct style. It's all coming up in tonight's Evan Miller Report, your conservative news stories, starting now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Public Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Wednesday, April the 1st, 2015. I'm Jason Miller. Also on tonight's program, 2 adoptees from South Korea face deportation from the U.S. That's in Global Socialism tonight. California's Governor Jerry Brown orders the first ever water restrictions here in California. And California maxes out on death row. All those plus the feminist teacher who shows her genitals in class. We'll tell you about that in tonight's Global Socialism segment on the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source. But, ladies and gentlemen, we do start off tonight over in Syria, where Daesh militants have entered the Palestinian refugee camp of Yarmouk in Damascus. According to activist and Palestinian officials, clashes erupted between the militants and groups inside the camp, with Daesh seizing controls of large parts of the camp, according to reports. The UN says about 18,000 Palestinian refugees are inside the camp. Danish militants had seized large swaths of territory in eastern Syria and across northern and western Iraq. But this is the group's first ever major attack near the heart of the Syrian capital. ISIS fighters had seized control of large parts of the camp, the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights and an official with the Palestinian Liberation Organization based in Damascus said. Yarmouk residents told BBC Arabic news service that members of Al-Khaf Bel al-Makis, a group formed by the Palestinian militiamen opposed to the Syrian government, were leading the fight against the ISIS militants alongside some Free Syrian Army fighters. Palestinian militiamen were able to retake some areas from Daesh later on Wednesday, according to residents who talked with the BBC. Meanwhile, the Iraqi government has declared a magnificent victory over Daesh militants in the city of Tikrit. Troops are still fighting to clear the last remaining Daesh holdout in the city, but Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi was filmed raising an Iraqi flag there. The month-long operation to recapture Tikrit has been the biggest lodged yet by the government against Daesh. It stalled for a time but was given fresh momentum when the U.S.-led coalition began airstrikes last week. The Army says it regards Tikrit's recapture as a key stage before it tries to retake Iraq's second city, Mosul, and drive Daesh out of the country altogether. On Wednesday, state television broadcast pictures showing Mr. Abdullahi, the Army and police commanders, Shia militia leaders, and the governor of Saadi province walking through Tikrit. The Reuters and ITN said the explosions and gunfire could be heard as Interior Minister Mohab al-Gibdi told reporters, quote, "Most of Tikrit today is liberated, only small parts remain outside of our control." Troops were trying to clear the northern district of Qanzuda and were also working to remove mines and bombs from recaptured areas. The Tikrit, which is about 90 miles north of the capital of Baghdad, was captured by Daesh militants last June as they swept southwards from Mosul through predominantly Sunni areas and routed the army. The offensive to recapture Tikrit was launched back on March the 2nd and involved some 30,000 personnel, two-thirds of them from the Popular Mobilization, also known as Hashad Shabi, a force comprising dozens of Iranian-backed Shia militia. Iranian military advisors led by Ghan Qasem Soleimani, the Revolutionary Guards Quds Force, initially coordinated the operation. Although there was no air support from the U.S.-led coalition, the government's forces made rapid progress over the first 2 weeks, driving Daesh militants out of the towns and villages along the Tigris River near Tikrit and then encircling the city. And of course, stay with the Evan Miller Report. We'll keep you updated on all these conflicts in the Middle East, including this next one in Yemen, where at least 35 workers have been killed by a blast at a dairy factory in western Yemen, medics say, as Saudi-led airstrikes continue against Houthi rebels. There were conflicting reports about the cause of the overnight explosion in the Red Sea port city of Hyundai. Witnesses say coalition aircraft hit warehouses belonging to the factory. Anti-aircraft guns then returned fire before the factory itself caught fire. The UN has expressed alarm at the rising number of civilian casualties in the region. On Tuesday, the High Commissioner for Human Rights warned that Yemen seemed to be on the verge of total collapse. The latest violence comes as dozens of Yemenis are reported to have crossed the Gulf of Aden in small boats to get to Somalia and Dubai to escape the fighting and Saudi airstrikes, says the UN Refugee Agency. The refugees braved a lengthy and dangerous journey after fleeing the city of Tanis, which was captured by the Houthi rebels last month and targeted by Saudi-led coalition airstrikes in recent days. The arrival of Yemeni refugees reveres a decades-old trend in which thousands of Somalians had sought sanctuary in Yemen to escape their own country's violence, where more than 1,500 arrived last week alone. Now to Nigeria, where a day after becoming the first politician in Nigerian history to succeed a sitting leader by ballot, President-elect Muhammadu Buhari, the dictator, promised on Wednesday to spare no effort to defeat the Danish militant group Boko Haram. The 72-year-old general and dictator, who came to power 3 decades ago by a military coup and campaign as a born-again Democrat, that's what the language is. I don't know if he's a Democrat, but back to the story, also promised to tackle graft in Africa's largest economy. Boko Haram will soon know the strength of our collective will. We should spare no effort, Buhari said in his first formal speech since winning the election. In tackling the insurgency, we have a tough and urgent job to do. The group has killed thousands in its push to carve out the Caliphate in northeastern Nigeria, as we have reported in the past few months. Despite the killing of more than a dozen voters by Boko Haram gunmen who had pledged to derail the poll, the election was one of the most orderly, says some, in Nigeria's history. Buhari won the election with 15.4 million votes to outgoing President Goodluck Jonathan's 13.3 million, a margin wide enough to prevent any challenge. In an unprecedented step, Jonathan phoned Buhari to concede defeat and urged his supporters to accept the result, a signal of deepening democracy in that country that few had expected in Africa's most populous nation. Buhari then congratulated Jonathan for peacefully relinquishing power today. All right, folks, on to Iran now, where talks on Iran's nuclear program will yet continue for another day, at least until Thursday morning, 2 days after the original deadline. This, according to U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, and BS artist, who has extended his stay to continue negotiations, officials say. However, a number of foreign ministers have left the talks, and China has warned compromise was essential. Otherwise, all previous efforts will be wasted. A deal will curb the nuclear program in return for sanctions relief. Negotiators between the so-called P5+5, the U.S., UK, France, China, and Russia, plus Germany and Iran continued on Wednesday at Louis's Ben Revenge Palace Hotel after overrunning the self-imposed deadline of March the 31st to reach a deal. On Wednesday evening, a U.S. State Department spokeswoman said, quote, "We continue to make progress, but will not have reached a political understanding. Therefore, Secretary Kerry will remain in Lausanne until at least Thursday morning to continue the negotiations," end quote. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius is also returning to Lausanne. He had previously said he will return to the talks as soon as it was useful. The P5+1 deal seeks to ensure Iran could assemble a nuclear weapon in less than a year. The Iranians insist they have no such ambition. Meanwhile, as those nuclear talks with Iran are going on, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to an Iranian military general who said Israel's destruction is non-negotiable. This from our friends at Pundit Press. Yesterday, an Iranian general brazenly declared, and I quote, "Israel's destruction is non-negotiable, but eventually giving Iran's murderous regime a clear path to the bomb is negotiable. This is unconscionable." I agree with those who have said that Iran's claim that its nuclear program is only for peaceful purposes doesn't square with Iranians' insistence on keeping underground nuclear facilities, advanced suffrages, and a heavy water reactor, nor does it square with Iran's insistence on developing ICBMs and its refusal to come clean on its past weapons efforts. At the same time, Iran is altering its campaign of terror, subjection, and conquest through the region, most recently in Yemen. The concessions offered to Iran in ways would ensure a bad deal that would endanger the Middle East and the peace of the world. Now is the time for international community to insist on a better deal. A better deal would significantly roll back Iran's nuclear infrastructure. A better deal would link the eventual lifting of the restrictions on Iran's nuclear program to change in Iran's behavior. Iran must stop its aggression in the region, stop its terrorism throughout the world, and stop its threats to annihilate Israel. That should be non-negotiable, and that's the deal that the powers must insist on. End quote. Powerful words coming from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. Of course, we'll keep an eye on those negotiations, and we will let you know as soon as they conclude what the result of those negotiations might be. But as we have reported, ladies and gentlemen, if this deal is passed between Iran and the United States and these P5+1 powers, this may be very damaging to the U.S. and its allies, as I stated yesterday. Over to Bulgaria now, where they have dropped a deal with U.S.-based firm Westinghouse Electric to build a new reactor at its only nuclear plant because of financial pressures. According to Prime Minister Boiko Provosko, who announced today. He said, quote, "We cannot uphold the agreement, which is worth $4 billion US, 3.8 billion euros, Bostov told Parliament, adding that the cash-strapped country was unable to shoulder the cost. The hasty deal signed by the previous socialist-led government just before it resigned last July envisaged the building of a 1,100-megawatt AP1000 reactor at the Kodolsky site, 120 miles north of the capital, Sofia. The agreement had been aimed at wearing Bulgaria off Russia as its main supplier of nuclear fuel, as well as gas used to produce electricity. Bulgaria's energy output took a hit after the country shut down 440 megawatt Soviet-built reactors before joining the European Union back in 2007. Only two 1,000 megawatt units are currently in operation at Kostoy. Westinghouse, a subsidiary of the Japanese company Toshiba, had initially planned to take on a 30% stake in the Koldois project, but Bulgarian media report that it now refused to invest in the deal. The company has not yet commented on the Borzvo's announcement. In 2012, Bulgaria was forced to drop yet another project, this time to build 2 Russian VVER 1,000 megawatt reactors at the planned Belini nuclear plant in the country's north. 9 British nationals have been seized by Turkish authorities after allegedly trying to enter Syria illegally. This coming from the armed forces in the country of Turkey. They were seized by authorities close to the Turkish border with Syria in the Haiti region of southern Turkey and remain in custody. The Britons included 3 men, 2 women, and 4 children, according to the AP news agency. A spokesman for the UK Foreign Office said it was looking into those reports. It is estimated around 600 Brits have already traveled to the region to fight since the conflict in Syria began. Around half are believed to have returned to the UK, according to the British Met Police. Most of the Britons are believed to have traveled to join the Daesh militant group, which controls large areas of Syria, as we reported earlier tonight, including sections of the border with Turkey. According to the BBC's diplomatic correspondent James Robbins, he says the numbers of arrests were significant, but he said it was not known whether the Britons were from the same family, whether they were individuals, or whether they were traveling in separate groups. He said, quote, "It's significant that the Turks were very keen to get the news out there to show that they were having some success in trying to plug that very porous border," he said. All right, ladies and gentlemen, time to move on to some political news, and tonight we start off with the foreign news tonight. D-minus 36 days and counting. And they don't tell you where you're going on the big blue battle bus until the night before, and even then they don't tell you why. So when they said Wolverhampton and Leeds to Mercine's Brewery and Brifton Soft Drinks Factory respectively, James Mates, the European editor from ITV, wondered what on earth was the theme, refreshing the parts other parties can't reach? Well, it all became clearer with the morning papers today. There on the front page of the Daily Telegraph was a letter signed by 103 businessmen endorsing Conservatives' economic plans, and among the signatories were the bosses of Marston's Brewery and the Briff soft drinks. And as the ITV's James Mates reports, Labour yawned loudly and said, of course, they're all Tories, but in the battle for the morning headlines across radio and TV, they had definitely lost out. And here is James Mates' report now on the update from the campaign trail. First, on the Conservative side in the UK.
They lead some of Britain's best-known companies and brand names, and the Conservatives are cock-a-hoop at getting so many on board so publicly. 103 business leaders were prepared to put their names to a letter in this morning's Daily Telegraph, including 5 who'd previously endorsed New Labour. The most prominent of them, Duncan Bannatyne, of Dragon's Den fame. Last time, he was happy to be seen backing Gordon Brown. When David Cameron and George Osborne then turned up at Marston's Brewery in Wolverhampton, whose chief executive had put his name to the letter, the extent of the coordination became clear. There was nothing spontaneous about this. It was a carefully planned piece of electioneering to ensure their central economic message was hammered home. But would anyone be surprised that the Tories are liked by their business friends? You're here talking to the bosses while Ed Miliband is talking about zero-hour contracts and the people at the bottom of the ladder. Doesn't this play into their narrative that you speak for the few, not the many?
We speak for the millions who want jobs and want those jobs to be maintained. And today it's an unprecedented intervention by some of Britain's leaders of the best-known businesses, large and small, in our country, saying the Conservative long-term economic plan is working, it's generating jobs, and the Labour alternative risks the recovery and risks job losses.
This visit and the visit by George Osborne to another signature of the letter in Yorkshire shows that this whole letter was carefully planned and coordinated by the Tory campaign. But they won't be embarrassed about that. From the Conservatives' point of view, it means another day fighting on their chosen battleground, the economy. The boss of this brewery was quite clear why he'd signed.
If I look at the last 5 years, we've invested several £100 million over that time period. We've created, on average, about 1,250 jobs each year during that period. And the taxation environment we're in makes a very big difference to that.
Labour gave it all a great big so what?
Well, here you have a letter put together by the Conservative Party appearing in a Conservative Party supporting newspaper containing donors and well-known supporters of the Conservative Party.
It's also no coincidence that today is the day budget cuts George Osborne made to corporation tax and employers' national insurance contributions come into force. Businesses like the Britvic factory here in Leeds are very keen on both measures. But of course it's not businesses who get to vote in 36 days' time. James Mates, ITV News, Leeds.
Many thanks to James Mates for that report on the Conservative side. Now over to the Labour side, where Labour leader Ed Miliband had pledged to prevent working people from exploitation by employers misusing zero-hours contracts. And as the ITV's Carl Denham reports, he says the battle lines have been drawn between his party, which he said would back working families, and the Tories, who he claimed were only looking after the country's elite few. Here's Carl's report.
Ed Miliband came to a factory that makes gearboxes for tanks today, and here he levelled his sights on one of Labour's major targets, zero-hours contracts, the ones which don't guarantee employees any work at all.
Less than a week ago, you may have heard the Prime Minister say that he couldn't live on a zero-hours contract. Well, I couldn't live on a zero-hours contract either. But I've just got a simple principle. If it's not good enough for us, then it's not good enough for you, and it's not good enough for Britain.
Joe Jennings was on a zero-hours contract as a care worker, and as the hours dried up, he was stuck in a job he couldn't afford.
And how did you get by? Were you struggling?
I didn't get by. I spent all my savings and everything. Everything went. You know, and you can't leave the job, because if you leave, you can't get benefit, you know, for some months. Best thing would have been if I got the sack.
How does that make you feel about zero-hours contracts?
Well, it's back to serfdom. It's back to the Middle Ages as far as I'm concerned. Well, it's daylight robbery.
There are 1.8 million zero-hours contracts in the UK, and on average workers are offered 23 hours a week. Under Labour's proposal, after 12 weeks, a worker would earn the right to a regular contract if they want one. They say at least 90% of zero-hours contracts would be affected. But some employers say they need the contracts.
If we were to lose the flexibility, we would employ less people to start with, so less people would actually enjoy employment with us. It would also put a strain on the charge that we're charging our customers, and be they local authority or be they our private customers.
A point I put to Ed Miliband today.
Isn't the problem with this that after 12 weeks, employers will be faced with either giving someone a regular contract they might not be able to afford to give them, or just letting them go?
Look, I don't accept that. You see, I think we've got to change the culture when it comes to the way that businesses who are relying on zero-hours contracts work, because the vast majority of businesses don't have their employees on zero-hours contracts.
In the opening days of this campaign, Ed Miliband has shown himself to be a willing friend to the workers, with an uneasy relationship with the bosses.
And that was the ITV's Carl Denham reporting on Labour's fight for using zero-hours contracts, the misuse of them, I should say. And I do apologize, ladies and gentlemen, probably been watching a little bit too much French news. I used the wrong word right before I introduced that report. I used a different word, and I was supposed to use the word few. I did correct myself before that report. I just wanted to be clear when I finished that report that I did make that correction that it is the elite few.
I know you did. Just a slip of the tongue, Jay.
Absolutely. And stay with the SHR Media Network. Tomorrow is the ITV Leaders Debate, where the 2-hour event, which begins at 8 p.m. British Standard Time, that's 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific here in the States, moderated by the ITV News' Julie Etchnam, which will be broadcast on the ITV News' website, and will provide a opening to the discussion to all 7 leaders. Each of the leaders have been allocated a podium lit with appropriately colored lights and arranged in order determined by drawing lots. They will also be given 1 minute each to answer 4 major election questions submitted by audience members and current viewers who watch ITV in London and chosen by an experienced editorial panel. The questions will not have been seen by any of the leaders ahead of time. Then the topic will be open for up to 18 minutes of debate. The Green Party leader, Natalie Bennett, will be the first speaker of the night, and then Prime Minister David Cameron will be given the final word. The 200-strong audience has been specifically chosen by polling company ICM to be broadly representative of the UK and is politically balanced, according to the network. Around 80% will be made up of voters who have expressed a voting intention, while 20% are still undecided at this time. Viewers watching via ITV News' website will also be able to rate the debate using a special interactive tool tracking their approval and disapproval trends with what is being said. After the debate, presenter Mark Austin will anchor ITV News at 10 from a debate studio with analysis from Julie Etchingham, who hosts those debates, while political correspondent Romilly Weeks will report live from the British Spin Room. Groups of undecided voters will also contribute their reactions to the debate as well. Following the regional bulletins, ITV News' political editor Tom Bradley will host the first ever new series of political panel show, The Agenda, with guests including comedian Rory Bremer and CNN's chief international correspondent Christiane Amanpour. And SHR is proud to be airing these debates tomorrow, so don't forget to tune in tomorrow, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, as I, your humble correspondent, anchor here from the States, SHR's coverage of the ITV Leaders Debates. We hope you join us tomorrow. Once again, those times, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, live on SHR and Pundit Press Radio. All right, folks, on that note, that's a wrap on tonight's international news. We are going to take a break. When we come back tonight, more news with Alan West sexual harassment case. Text messages now confirm Alan West tried to suppress the story into past in 2014, according to text messages by Charles C. Johnson is reporting. Also, U.S. Senator Bob Menendez has been indicted on corruption charges. We'll tell you what those charges are. Plus, Corey Evan has the day's other news. Corey?
Yes, I still have the story of the oldest living person in the world dying, and now the Guinness Book of World Records is going to have to identify her successor. In addition to that, GoDaddy's IPO is the top story in our business report coming up. And I've got a lawsuit that was thrown out with a transvestite trying to get the right to use the opposite gender bathroom, opposite gender of which they were born into. And Katie Couric takes over the Late Late Show, just as our good friend James Corden takes over. Goodness sakes. That's all coming up after the break on the Evan Miller Report, here on SHR Media.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Radio.
News. News.
Radio.
News.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Misao Okawa, the world's oldest person, died today, local time, at age 117. I'm Corey Evan. Welcome back to the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller will be back in just a few short moments. Miss Okawa was born on March 5th, 1898 in Osaka, Japan. Guinness World Records recognized Miss Okawa as the oldest person in 2013. The organization will now work to authenticate her replacement on the list. Miss Okawa married her husband, Yukio, in 1919. He died in 1931 after the couple had 3 children together, 2 daughters and a son, AP reported. Coming home to the U.S., according to the AP, Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin made a promise of a big announcement today, and it turns out, in honor of April Fool's Day, it had nothing to do with presidential politics. Walker, widely expected to compete for the GOP presidential nomination, took to Twitter to promise his followers big news at 10 a.m. today. At the appointed hour, Walker tweeted his support for the Wisconsin Badgers, who played top seed Kentucky on Saturday in the Final Four. And he is quoted as saying, quote, "America needs big, bold leadership, and that's why I'm supporting Coach Ryan and the @BadgerMMB Saturday," Walker wrote, adding the hashtag April Fools. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. A convicted murderer awaiting sentencing escaped from a jail in eastern Illinois Wednesday after overpowering a guard and taking his keys, uniform, and SUV.
Really?
Cameron,
what a brave guy, huh?
Yes. Cameron T. Taylor, who has a history of escape attempts, fled from the Jerome Combs Detention Center at about 3 a.m., the Kankakee County Sheriff's Office said. Taylor, a
All right, folks, I think we may have lost Corey Evan. Hopefully we can get him back here in just a
and
moment.
the Sheriff's Office has asked for help from the U.S. Marshal Service Fugitive Task Force. So how about that, Jay? He made the job of finding him very easy. Just look for a brown Chevy Equinox and look for a guy who's got a gun behind the wheel, and you found him.
Sounds like an easy mystery. They should write a Sherlock Holmes novel. Oh, wait, Sherlock Holmes is in the UK. That makes no sense here in the US. I'm sure there's
Unfortunate.
a version of Sherlock Holmes here, though.
Yeah, I'm sure it's... Wait, maybe Dick Tracy will
There
resonate
you
with
go.
some of our listeners.
See? There you go. See?
Yeah, it just took a while to come to me.
There you go. It's part of that Southern California Jeopardy thing that's going on.
Nice. Right, so next story. A noose was discovered hanging on a tree outside Duke University Student Center early this morning. The noose has since been removed, according to USA Today, but photos taken have prompted outrage on social media. Vice President of Student Affairs Larry Moneta described the act as hateful and stupid in an email to students early Wednesday. He said the Duke community would provide students with the support necessary to get through this time, expressing hope that the cowardly act of bias would strengthen students' resolve to support each other. The discovery of the noose comes approximately 2 weeks after a black female student alleged that a group of white males chanted a racist song at her. This incident prompted President Richard Broadhead and Provost Sally Kornbluth to send an email to students with an affirmation that the university has a commitment to racial equity. Broadhead and Kornbluth sent a second email Wednesday condemning the hanging of the noose and announcing that a public forum to discuss the incident would be held during our show on the steps of Duke Chapel. Too bad I can't get over there to broadcast this, but unfortunately I don't have a private jet, so I wouldn't be able to get there quick enough, probably, knowing LAX.
You just gotta call Al Gore. He got plenty of carbon credits. He would have said, "Come on board! You can use my carbon credits anytime!"
But wouldn't that mean supporting a socialist?
Not really. The conservatives support the socialists all the time.
True. Yeah.
Carly Fiorina, anybody?
Now you're making sense there. Right. Speaking of Fiorina, want to get to business? There's that beautiful chime. And Dow Jones is down 77 points at 17,698. The Nasdaq's down 20 at 4880, and the S&P 500 is down by 8 at 2059. While Eurozone politicians are busy dampening so-called Grexit fears, billionaire investor Warren Buffett is taking a different tack, endorsing a Greek exit. This is according to MarketWatch. Speaking with CNBC's Becky Quick in an interview on Tuesday, the chief executive and chairman of Berkshire Hathaway suggested that it may not be a bad thing for the euro if the struggling Mediterranean nation left the currency. His comments come as Greece and its international leaders are scrambling to reach an agreement on a reform program that is a prerequisite for payout of the next portion of bailout funds. The anti-austerity Greek government is campaigning for greater leniency on the bailout terms, while the lenders, particularly Germany, insist that Greece must stick to already agreed commitments. After several attempts to hammer out a deal, no final agreement is in place, and several economists say the country is at risk of running out of cash later this month unless further financial aid is unlocked. And it's giving me the hiccups just thinking about it, so I think we better move on. The U.S. manufacturing sector clearly caught a cold in the final months of winter. Whether its symptoms are likely to persist or fade with the onset of warmer weather are less certain. A closely followed survey of manufacturing executives known as ISM fell in March for the fifth straight month, hitting the lowest level since mid-2013. While harsh winter weather is partly to blame, the index has fallen every month since November, in a sign that a strong dollar and perhaps more enduring factors are at fault. The index slipped to 51.5% from 52.9% in February, and has fallen every month since November, the Institute for Supply Management said. As recently as last August, the survey had stood at a 3-year high of 58.1%. Although readings over 50% indicate more manufacturers are expanding instead of contracting, the trend on the ISM is worrisome. Only 10 of the 18 industries tracked by ISM, for example, reported growth last month, down from 14 in January and 17 in August. What's more, companies continue to scale back on hiring. The index measuring employment fell to 50%, the worst reading also since May 2013. So we will keep an eye on business and see what's going on, and see if those employment numbers go up or down. But I think we already have an idea of what's going on. I think they're all on Wall Street is what they're doing. Shares of web hosting company GoDaddy Inc. soared nearly 31% in their first day of trading on Wall Street, another sign of strength in the tech sector in an otherwise lackluster stock market. Investors pushed the share price to $26.15 today from its initial $20 IPO price. The closing price values the company at nearly $4 billion. The stock, trading under the symbol GDDY on the New York Stock Exchange, hit a high of $26.84 during trading. The Scottsdale, Arizona company, perhaps best known for its racy TV ads, jacked up the number of shares it offered to 23 million, 1 million more than it had planned because of strong market demand. It raised more than $460 million in the IPO. It comes as the company is engaged in the tricky task of overhauling its flamboyant image, cemented by its edgy Super Bowl commercials featuring supermodel Bar Rafali and race car driver Danica Patrick. The company now wants to be seen as a serious and reliable provider of web hosting and other internet services for the hotly contested small business market. So, what do you say are the chances of GoDaddy shaping their image into something more sensible like that, Jay?
I have no clue whatsoever when it comes to that. As far as GoDaddy is concerned, when I see GoDaddy is all I hear about is women stripping.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And actually, it reminds me of speaking of their Super Bowl ad, I'm just now remembering like a few snippets of what I heard, that initially they too had a ad with a puppy dog being offered for sale, it seems, on one of their hosted websites. So I can see why folks are a little upset about that. Trying to abandon a puppy or something like that, I guess, was the message some of them got.
Yep, that's the controversy indeed. Corey Evan with the business news. Thank you very much for that, Corey Evan. Back in a couple minutes with tonight's lawsuits across America and the entertainment report tonight. All right, over to some DC news, and we start off with the story that just keeps on giving tonight. Though both Alan West and his wife Angela have denied GotNews.com's reporting and maligned its editor as a racist. Got News, according to Charles Johnson, it making the accusation that Alan West and his wife Angela has maligned its editor as a racist, I should say. GotNews.com is now releasing some text messages that, from what they say, confirm Alan West tried to suppress a story into his past groping of Fox News contributor Michelle Fields in February of 2014. The text messages between Michelle Fields and GotNews.com editor-in-chief Charles Johnson date from February 14, 2014, and confirm West knew about Johnson's story. Fields texted, "Alan emailed Tucker asking if he knows any info on the story you're writing. Obviously he freaked. Tucker claims Alan thinks you're writing the story with Jamie." Response, I have not talked to Jamie or Tucker in weeks. That's so weird. I think Alan was trying to get the story killed. Response, I have nothing to do with the caller anymore. I don't even click on it. So weird, says Michelle. Kind of awesome he's doing damage control. I'm out to dinner. Can I call you tomorrow? Later is better. Yep, that's exactly what he's doing. If you can, I have something that I think you'll want to hear. Are you still going to write the story? Says says Michelle. Sorry, don't do text to discuss my work, said Johnson. You there? And that's just part of the text here. And as I stated, ladies and gentlemen, we're still waiting for Alan West to contact the Evan Miller Report. We've put multiple requests out to Johnson's aide, to West's aide, for Mr. West to come onto the program. He has so far not returned my calls to come on the Evan Miller Report to defend himself in that. All right, on to another story today that's making big news in the political world. The Justice Department has indicted U.S. Senator Robert Mendez from New Jersey and his friend Dr. Salmon Miljan, a Florida orthopologist, on corruption charges. Robert Mendez, who is a U.S. Senator, and Dr. Miljan, a Florida ophthalmologist, as I stated, were indicted today in connection with a bribery scheme which Mendez allegedly accepts gifts from Magellan in exchange for using the power of his Senate office to benefit Miljan's financial and personal interest. Peter Carr, a Justice Department spokesman, said in a statement today. Specifically, the indictment alleges, among other gifts, Mendez accepted flights on Magellan's private jet, a first-class commercial flight, and a flight on a chartered jet, numerous vacations at Miljan's Caribbean villa in the Dominican Republic, and a hotel room in Paris, and $40,000 in contributions to his legal defense fund, and over $750,000 in campaign contributions. Mendez allegedly never disclosed any of the reportable gifts that he received from Melgen on his financial disclosure forms. The job of an elected official is to serve the people. The citizens of New Jersey have the right to demand honest, unbiased service and representation from all elected officials at all levels of government, said Special Agent in Charge Richard M. Frankel today. Incredibly, the Department of Justice has made clear once again their motives by informing the media before informing the senator, a spokesman for Mendez said. According to the indictment, Mendez allegedly engaged in 3 efforts to use his Senate office and staff to advocate on behalf of Melgen's personal and financial interest. And just a note here on the program, GotNews.com's Charles C. Johnson is taking credit for exposing Mendez's indictment, citing that he did an investigation into Mendez last year. There's no confirmation whether that is true or not, at least to my knowledge, on this desk at this time. All right, folks, that's it for the D.C. news. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our continuing battle, as we like to call it, Corey Evan.
Global socialism!
Thank you very much, Corey. And we start off on tonight's Global Socialism tonight, where more than 3 decades ago, a 3-year-old South Korean boy and his sister flew to the U.S. to become the adopted children of American citizens. But their life together didn't last long. They were abandoned by their American parents, sent into foster care, and then separated. A family adopted the girl and got her citizenship. The boy, however, was eventually named Adam Krasper, wasn't as fortunate. The parents he had were abusive and never sought the green card or citizenship for him they should have. Now at 39, after struggling with joblessness because of his lack of immigration papers, homelessness, and crime, Kretzer, a married father of 3, is facing deportation because he's not a citizen. The state abandoned him when he was a child, as attorney Lori Wallace says. Now the U.S. is throwing him out. A deportation hearing is set for April the 2nd. Federal immigration officials say they became aware of Krasper after he applied to renew his green card 2 years ago. His criminal convictions, ranging from burglary to assault, made him potentially deportable under immigration law. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement wasn't aware of Krasper's childhood adoption history when it decided to pursue his deportation, agency spokesman Andrew Moon said. U.S. Senators Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota and Jeff Merkley, both Democrats, are proposing a standalone automatic citizenship bill for adoptees like Krasper. It was not his responsibility to fill out that immigration paperwork. He knows no other country. Activists say thousands of adoptees don't know they are citizens until they try to get a job, register to vote, or apply for a passport. The federal government does not track the citizenship status of international adoptees or how many have faced deportation. The State Department says it's fully aware of adult adoptees who are in immigration removal proceedings. On to California today, and Corey Evan, hate to say it, but our governor is at it again here in California. He's now implemented the first mandatory water restrictions in the state's history.
Why am I not surprised?
So every time you flush the toilet, Corey Evan, don't forget a drone may be watching you. The order mandates a 25% reduction in water usage for cities and towns across the, what they say, is a parched state. We say it's just the government-controlled drought. Back to the story. They say vast areas of government-owned lawns will be replaced by drought-tolerant landscaping, and towns will be banned from watering ornamental grass. Last year, Jerry Brown proclaimed a state of emergency after years of drought. He says the snow in the mountains is at its lowest level since records began, so water supplies from melting snow will be lower than normal in coming months. Brown said, quote, "We are standing on dry grass and we are standing in 5 feet of snow from the Sierra Nevada mountains. People should realize we're in a new era. The idea of your nice little green grass gets lots of water every day, that's going to be a thing of the past." That coming from him, yet the water going out into the San Francisco Bay from the Colorado River to protect the smelt or the salmon from protecting the salmon and allowing them to go upstream is still an awe to me, isn't it, Corey Evan?
Absolutely right, and it makes me wonder, what on earth did Barbara Boxer do that was so right that Californians felt, I should say, now that she's announcing she's not running for re-election, that she was the candidate for the Senate? I mean, she's not done anything near worthy to report on, is it?
No, actually not. Moving on to our next story. Litigated to all but a halt, California's system of capital punishment has backed up to crisis levels, failing death row to capacity and prompting an emergency proposal from Governor Jerry Brown. 9 years after California's last execution, the system's near shutdown has become national and, according to some, international news. Warning that there is little time to lose, the LA Times is reporting Governor Brown is asking the California legislature for $3.2 million to open nearly 100 more cells for condemned men at San Quentin State Prison. The proposed expansion would take advantage of cells made available as the state releases low-level drug offenders and thieves under a new law voters approved last year. Well, I didn't vote for it. Neither did Corey Evan. The law, which was on the ballot as Prop 47, had made significant impact on the California prison system, already dropping the number of felonies in the state by some 40,000. According to the Times, Brown's bid was slated for a subcommittee hearing last month chaired by State Senator Lloyd Hancock from Berkeley, of all places. And I'm sure the Sackheads will have something to say about that tonight on the Sackheads radio show, 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here on SHR. California is in a catch-22 situation, she said in a statement provided to the Times newspaper. We are required by the courts to address prison overcrowding, and we are required by law to provide certain minimum conditions for housing death penalty inmates. The legislature can't avoid its responsibilities in these areas, even though the courts are currently considering the constitutionality of the death penalty, and I hope will agree to end it. Okay, and yes, I know. I'm getting the little hurry up tone in my ear here. So what I will do is, I know Corey Evan was a little shaken up before the broadcast when I was going to do the story about the feminist teacher showing her genitals in the classroom. So I will spare him that one and post that story up on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. As well, due to time, the 11-year-old suspended after recording teacher threatening to beat up students. So, Corey Evan, it's time for that little famous catchline you become famous for.
When will our hold on, not yet with the echo. When will our leaders finally get immigration really right? What is it with women not wanting to wear underpants? Talk about insanity. And how did this bowl of onions end up in my studio? Get out of here with those onions. Stay tuned for developments. Socialism.
I think the onions made Corey's ecosystem cry today. Corey Evans closing out tonight's Global Socialism tonight. Indeed. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado tonight, it's time for tonight's Lawsuits Across America.
And now it's time for Lawsuits Across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Yeah. Sit. We only got time for this one lawsuit today. I'll post the others up on the Facebook. Universities have a rational reason for segregating students by their biological sex when they use restrooms, showers, locker rooms, and similar facilities, according to a Johnstown federal judge ruling yesterday, in dismissing a transgender man's lawsuit against the University of Pittsburgh. Seamus Johnson identified himself as female when he applied to the university's Johnstown campus. U.S. District Judge Kim Gibson said in his ruling granting the university's motion to dismiss the university. While Johnson claims in the lawsuit that he is medically a male, he didn't provide any evidence of having undergone sex change, and he didn't follow the university's procedure for having his gender officially changed in his college records, the judge said. Yeah, you might want to take care of that sort of stuff first before you go filing one of these little items on the docket. Otherwise, it's going to end up just like this brief lawsuits across.
And that was a brief lawsuits across America. It looks like we...
E-Online instead of... I'm still here, Jay.
Yeah, well, apparently the Skype didn't think you were here, but you did conclude tonight's lawsuits across America. Now you have the entertainment report. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. Yeah, instead of watching your back on April Fool's Day, maybe you should watch your step. James Corden thought Wednesday's edition of The Late Late Show would be another hilarious show. He didn't know, however, that the laughs would come at his expense. When welcoming guest Katie Couric to the stage, the newest CBS host immediately freaked out when his guest experienced a horrible fall down a flight of stairs. As the audience looked on in shock, Corden sprang into action by running towards the injured journalist. But as it turns out, it was just a big old prank. April Fool's Day, the real Couric said after appearing at the top of the stairs just a few moments later. Was that too mean? Then Corden explained, I can't breathe. That's like my worst nightmare. Oh, actually, I should put in my British accent. I can't breathe. That's like my worst nightmare. That's so funny. That's an amazing prank. He added, we've been talking about these stairs and going back and forth. Oh my gosh, Katie Couric just died. So if that wasn't Couric, who took the fall?
Who did take the fall?
Blaine, quote, can we give it up for Heidi, my stunt double? She's so great and funny. Yeah, that's a good time for Corden to breathe a major sigh of relief right there, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope to entertain you again tomorrow with more entertaining stuff. And might I say, Katie Couric finally redeemed herself after almost killing CBS Evening News.
Oh, dear. My goodness. I was falling asleep every night that I had to watch the bulletin. Oh, my goodness.
Well, you didn't have to. You could always hit the remote, but I get you.
Yeah, well, I did. I put her in last place. That's what I did.
Excellent.
So, well, looks like Katie Couric may be better off in the entertainment sector than she is in the news sector. But
yeah,
again,
that's her home.
With her failed ABC show, the Katie Couric show, that didn't last long, did it?
No, it didn't. But that's because the talk show genre is just so cutthroat anymore. I mean, if Kris Jenner can't keep a show on for more than half a season, then you can tell how tough it is out there.
Absolutely. All right, that's Corey Evan. He got the entertainment news there tonight. And Corey Evan will be back tomorrow with the entertainment news. A lot of films coming out tomorrow. He'll have your box office review report tomorrow on the Evan Miller Report. And on that note, that is the Evan Miller Report for this Wednesday, April the 1st, 2015. Hope you're enjoying the first day of April here, folks. Coming up next, the National Weather Forecast with the BBC Met Office's Philip Avery. For Corey Evan, I'm Jason Miller saying so long. Coming up next, after the weather, the Exceptional Conservative Show with Ken McClinton. After that, it's Sackheads Radio with the Sackhead Sean, Sackheads Glenn, and free that Sackhead Socko. That's an order. Understand? At 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here on SHR. Again, for all of us here at the Evan Miller Report, have a great night. Here's the weather with Philip Avery. Good night, everybody.
Well, that time, I had a quick look on how things are going to pan out across Canada and the USA over the next 2 or 3 days or so. This is a very active weather front indeed, simply because we have warm, moist air piling out of the Gulf, something slightly cooler coming in on its western and northwestern flanks, and when those two competing air masses meet, that always makes for a very active front, and at this time of year, yes, you know exactly where we are. It's that sort of season where some of these heavier thundery downpours already encompassing quite a bit of gusty wind activity, a lot of hail as well, damaging hail at that, could well turn tornadic. And on the western shores of Canada, well, we're just waiting for the arrival, and some of you don't have to wait, across the northwest, of this particular weather feature. That's going to produce quite a bit of rain in the Vancouver area over the next 2 or 3 days or so. Once we come a bit further south into this southwestern quarter of the USA, the story is still one of dry, fine weather, limited amount of rainfall, I'm afraid, and heat as well. Those are not concerns, I'm afraid, whilst we're out in the eastern states. It's just where you are in relation to this very active weather front. Please pay attention to the local forecast. That is going to be a real problem area for the next 24 hours or so. We'll still see a little bit of winteriness about some of those showers as we move towards the weekend on the eastern side of Canada. And you've seen the weather front, and there's the weather associated with it for Vancouver and Seattle.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.